Hi friends, Miss Cindy here from the Annville Free Library, back again with another story time. Can you say hello? Hello, 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 and how are you? I'm fine, I'm fine. I hope that you are too. Can you guess what our stories are about today? We're gonna have fun with hats. Do you have a hat? Maybe you could take a minute to pause this video and find your hat to wear. Now, our very first story is about Mrs. Honey. Here is Mrs. Honey. The story is about Mrs. Honey's hat. Written and illustrated by Pam Adams. Mrs. Honey had a hat. On Monday, she wore it when she took her grandson Peter to the park. She bought him some bubble gum, and then she sat on a bench with her knitting. I see Peter has a bow and arrows. Peter thought, these feathers would make my arrows fly better. So he pulled the feathers off of the hat, and his bubble gum stuck to the brim. But Mrs. Honey didn't notice. On Tuesday, Mrs. Honey wore her hat to visit a friend. They sat in the garden in the shade of a tree, and they ate cakes. Some birds flew down to pick up the crumbs. These cherries look good, they chirped. So they flew down and flew off with the cherries. One little bird left some eggs behind. But Mrs. Honey didn't notice. On Wednesday, Mrs. Honey spent a day at the seaside. The sun shone and the water was just right for paddling. Mrs. Honey felt very happy. Afterwards, Mrs. Honey took off her hat and sat in the sun. A hermit crab thought, that shell would make a nice home. So he scuttled away with the shell, and he left some seaweed. But Mrs. Honey didn't notice. On Thursday, Mrs. Honey picked some dandelions to make dandelion wine. It was very hard work. She took off her hat and put it on the fence. A cow in the field saw the hat on the fence. What beautiful big buttercups, she mooed. So she took a mouthful, and her bell fell onto Mrs. Honey's hat. But Mrs. Honey didn't notice. On Friday, Mrs. Honey went to see an old castle. Oh my, just look at those cobwebs, exclaimed Mrs. Honey. This place could do with a good clean. A big black spider dropped down onto her hat. Hooray, he said. This lace will make a good strong cobweb. So he hurried away with the lace and left behind some of his old webs. But Mrs. Honey didn't notice. On Saturday, Mrs. Honey took her cat to a cat show. There were all sorts of fine cats, but she hoped that hers would win first prize. An alley cat saw Mrs. Honey's hat through the window. "Meow, that ribbon might help me to win a prize," he thought. So he pulled it from the hat and left some fish bones behind. But Mrs. Honey didn't notice. On Sunday, Mrs. Honey went to church. Everyone seemed to be staring at her. Whatever can it be? She wondered. Perhaps it's time I bought a new hat. After the service, Mrs. Honey hurried home to look in the mirror. Then she noticed the bubble gum and the eggs and the seaweed, the bell and the cobwebs and the fish bones. "Oh, my goodness!" she exclaimed. "I've got a new hat!" But she wasn't really sure she liked it. The end. Oh, Mrs. Honey. Here's a fun book. Finders Keepers. Written and illustrated by Kiko Kaska. Do you know what this is? An acorn? A seed from an oak tree? Who might like that seed, that acorn? One day a squirrel found a big acorn. "Yay! Finders keepers!" he cried. "I'm going to save this for later," thought the squirrel. So he dug a hole and buried it. How is he going to remember where to find it again? Then he left his hat to mark the spot. "You stay put, hat," said the squirrel. "I'll be back tomorrow." But once the squirrel had gone, the wind began to blow. Can you help me make the wind? It lifted the hat higher and higher until it landed in a tree next to a little bird. "Wow, what a terrific nest!" cried the bird. "Finders keepers!" She snuggled into her new nest, but soon it began to wobble. It wobbled and wobbled until whoosh, it fell into a nearby stream. The hat quickly floated along until an ant spotted it. "Yippee! What a nice boat!" cried the ant. "Finders keepers!" The ant hopped on board and sailed on until splash! A big wave nearly turned the boat upside down. "What was that?" cried the ant. Do you know what it was? It was a bear. "Hey, look at this. What a perfect clown nose," cried the bear. "Finders keepers." Wearing his handsome red nose, the bear juggled and juggled until his nose started to tickle. Can you help me? Achoo! The bear's nose went flying. Do you know what was tickling the bear's nose? and was still in there. The hat flew and flew until finally it landed near a flower patch. Does that flower patch look familiar to you? The next day the squirrel returned. There you are, he said to the hat. Exactly where I left you. He dug up his acorn and happily munched away. Yummy! And that was the end of the story. Until someone else came along. What a cool hat, cried the snake. Finders, keepers. I like that story. Well, we're going to finish off here with a hat book called Hats, written by Dana Meekum Rao and illustrated by Paul Harvey. I need to wear a hat. Which one? All my hats are so much fun. A hat with stripes. Don't my tongue. A hat with spots. A hat with ears. I have lots. A hat with bows. A hat with flaps. Boy, I have so many hats. This hat is short. This hat is tall. I cannot choose. I'll wear them all. The end. Oh my goodness. So many silly hats. How about this silly hat? See if we can try this song with your hat, whatever hat you're wearing. On my head, I wear a hat. It is such a silly hat that my head will wiggle waggle to and fro. Where else can my silly hat go? On my foot I wear a hat. It is such a silly hat that my foot will wiggle waggle to and fro. Where else can my silly hat go? On my elbow I wear a hat. It is such a silly hat that my elbow will wiggle waggle to and fro. Where else can my silly hat go? On my knee I wear a hat. It is such a silly hat that my knee will wiggle waggle to and fro. Where else can my silly hat go? Can you think of some places where the silly hat can go and you can sing some more verses with your hat? Have fun. Maybe you'd just like to make your own silly hat. You can take a piece of cardstock or heavy paper and just draw a hat shape and decorate it with stickers or feathers or anything you can find. There's some paint dots, some flowers, whatever you can find to make a silly hat. You can take a headband, just take some pieces of paper, staple them together, make it as big as your head, and then staple your hat onto your headband. Let's see how this works. And there, you've got a silly hat. You could even just make a silly hat out of the funny papers. Just fold it up any way you want. Use a little Scotch tape and make a silly hat. You can decorate it any way you want. You might even have an old birthday hat that you could glue things onto. That could be fun too. Well, I think it's time to say goodbye. See you later, alligator. After a while, crocodile. Give a hug, ladybug. Blow a kiss, jellyfish. See you soon, you big raccoon. Out the door, dinosaur. Take care, polar bear. Wave goodbye, butterfly. See you next week.